Every man grows up being told that strength is measured by control. Control over his emotions, control over his reactions, control over how much he lets the world see. He is taught to be the protector, the pursuer, the provider. But in that conditioning, something deeply human gets buried: his vulnerability. It's the side of him that feels too much, that wants to be held, that yearns to be understood beyond the surface of what he does or how he performs. When a man begins to fall for someone, that carefully built armor he's worn for years starts to tremble. It's not because he's weak, but because for the first time, he senses that being strong might look different than he's been told. It might look like letting someone see the parts of him that are not always proud, polished, or in control. In those moments of connection, whether it's through a conversation that feels too real or a silence that holds too much meaning, he feels a tension within himself, the pull between the man he's supposed to be and the man he truly is. The world doesn't prepare him for this kind of nakedness. He's been rewarded for stoicism, for keeping things light, for pretending that nothing touches him too deeply. Yet with her, that facade begins to crack. Her presence disarms him in a way he can't rationalize. She listens differently. She sees through his practiced smiles and confident words. And that recognition terrifies him because it means she's not seeing the image he's worked so hard to project. She's seeing him. When a man allows a woman into that private space of his emotions, he's not just opening up. He's surrendering years of self-protection. He's showing the part of himself that fears failure, that remembers rejection, that doubts his worth. He's letting her witness the boy inside who once needed to prove himself, and the man who's tired of pretending he has it all figured out. That is where real intimacy begins for him, not in the grand gestures, but in the silent decision to stop performing. The decision to let himself be small, unsure, tender. The decision to be real, even if it risks being misunderstood. There's a quiet kind of courage in that, because vulnerability for a man doesn't come naturally. It feels like walking into a storm without a shield. But when he feels seen without being judged, something inside him softens. The walls he's built to protect himself begin to lose their purpose. He feels the safety of being accepted not for his achievements, but for his humanity. In that moment, strength takes on a new meaning, not as dominance, but as openness, not as control, but as surrender. What he feels is a mixture of relief and fear, liberation and uncertainty. Because letting someone in means giving up the illusion that he's invincible. It means trusting that who he really is, beyond the armor, might be enough. Emotional safety is the quiet foundation of a man's capacity to love. It is not something he consciously asks for, because most men are not taught to articulate emotional needs. They're taught to meet them with logic, to fix rather than to feel. But beneath that conditioning lies a truth he rarely admits. What he craves more than anything is to feel that it's safe to be himself without being judged, mocked, or misunderstood. When a woman gives him that safety, she doesn't just capture his attention, she reaches a place within him that few ever touch. It's in her tone when she speaks to him, the softness in her eyes when he falters, the patience in her silence when he struggles to find words. It's in the way she listens, not to reply, but to understand. In that space, he feels something rare. He feels seen. Every man carries invisible scars, disappointments, past relationships, moments where his openness was used against him. Some have learned that emotional honesty can lead to rejection or ridicule. So they've learned to keep it hidden behind humor, ambition, or distraction. But when he meets someone who makes him feel safe enough to let the guard down, it stirs something he's not used to feeling. It's unfamiliar and sometimes even frightening because he's no longer in control of how deeply he can be affected. She creates a space where he can finally exhale, not the shallow breath he takes when he's performing, but the deep one that comes when he feels he doesn't have to pretend anymore. That kind of safety is magnetic. It makes him linger in her presence, wanting to stay longer, speak more honestly, and reveal more of the layers he's kept hidden from everyone else. Emotional safety for him doesn't come from reassurance alone. It comes from consistency. It's when her words match her energy, when she can hold his silence without trying to fix it, when she doesn't see his struggle as weakness, but as a sign of his humanity. In that environment, he begins to trust again. He begins to rebuild a part of himself that he had long abandoned. The part that wants to connect deeply, to love without strategy, to be vulnerable without fear of being diminished. What most people don't realize is that when a man feels safe, he doesn't retreat, he expands. He becomes more giving, more affectionate, more communicative. The safety she gives him doesn't make him soft in a fragile way, it makes him strong in a grounded way. It gives him permission to step into his full emotional capacity. That's why the men who feel emotionally safe with a woman rarely take it for granted. It's not just comfort, it's healing. It's the kind of safety that allows him to stop running from himself, to stop hiding behind control. It's the moment he realizes that love doesn't demand that he be perfect. It only asks that he be real. Inside every man lives a silent war between desire and fear. Desire pulls him forward, urging him toward closeness, toward the intoxicating magnetism of being wanted, touched, and known. Fear pulls him back, whispering that closeness might cost him his sense of control, his autonomy, his identity. This internal conflict shapes how he approaches intimacy, because while his body may crave connection, his mind worries about what happens when someone gets close enough to see the parts of him he hides even from himself. Every man, no matter how confident he appears, carries a certain uncertainty about what will happen when he's fully seen, when the version of himself he presents to the world dissolves in front of someone who truly matters. That tension between desire and fear is not just physical, it's psychological. Desire says, let her in, trust her, feel this, while fear says, what if you lose yourself? What if she leaves when she knows too much? It's not the fear of rejection that terrifies him most. It's the fear of being known and then rejected anyway. So many men live in that push and pull, oscillating between moments of deep connection and sudden withdrawal. He might lean in one moment, showing his affection and vulnerability, only to pull back the next, as if trying to regain the emotional control he feels slipping away. It's not inconsistency, it's protection. It's the instinctive response of someone who has learned that the more he invests emotionally, the greater the risk of pain. When he meets a woman who evokes both desire and emotional depth, he stands at a crossroad. She awakens the longing to be close, not just physically, but emotionally. He feels drawn to the warmth in her energy, the authenticity in her laughter, the sincerity in her attention. Yet, that very closeness exposes the side of him that has long been covered by composure and independence. Desire wants to bridge the distance. Fear wants to maintain it. In those moments, he might appear conflicted, hot and cold, expressive and withdrawn, passionate yet hesitant. What's really happening is that he's navigating the space between what he craves and what terrifies him. The more real the connection feels, the stronger that internal struggle becomes. For many men, intimacy is not just an act of connection, but an act of surrender. It's surrendering the narrative that says he must always lead, always know, always stay composed. To allow himself to feel deeply is to risk unraveling. And yet, the paradox is that the more he resists vulnerability, the more distant he feels, not just from her, but from himself. The women who truly touch him are those who understand this dance, who don't rush his process, who create a space where he doesn't feel pressured to choose between desire and safety. Because when he senses that he can have both, when his desire doesn't threaten his sense of security, he lets go of the fear. And in that letting go, he experiences connection in its purest form. There is a quiet reverence that settles into a man when he feels accepted without judgment. It is not the loud, showy kind of gratitude that can be seen or easily described. It's the subtle shift that happens deep inside, where pride and vulnerability coexist. When a woman looks at him and sees beyond his mistakes, beyond the moments he fumbles with words or hides behind humor, something inside him exhales. Acceptance for him is not just being liked for his best parts. It's being embraced despite the parts he's still trying to understand. The world often measures him by his performance, how strong he is, how successful, how decisive. But when someone sees him as more than his output, when she recognizes the soul behind the actions, he feels a kind of peace that's rare and almost sacred. This feeling isn't loud. It doesn't come with grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It shows up in how his energy changes around her. He's calmer. His guard softens. His words carry a certain warmth that wasn't there before. That's the unspoken gratitude. The way he starts to relax into her presence. Not because she demanded it, but because her acceptance gave him permission to. When a man realizes he no longer has to hide the imperfect parts of himself, he begins to show more of who he truly is. He stops performing, stops editing, stops trying to impress. And that shift is deeply emotional for him, even if he never says it out loud. It's a kind of belonging that feels safer than any victory, more grounding than any praise. A man who feels accepted doesn't just feel loved, he feels I've understood. There's a difference. Love can sometimes be conditional, depending on what he provides or how he behaves. But understanding meets him where he is. It holds space for his contradictions, his confidence and his insecurity, his ambition and his exhaustion. That kind of acceptance builds trust slowly, quietly. It tells him that he doesn't need to wear his armor to be respected, that he doesn't need to win her approval by proving his worth. And the more she shows him that he is enough as he is, the more he naturally wants to become better, not out of pressure, but out of inspiration. Acceptance has a transformative effect. It invites growth through safety, not through demand. When a woman receives him in that way, it touches a part of him that even he didn't know was waiting to be seen. It's not about fixing him or saving him. It's about seeing him, seeing the man beneath the surface, the one who struggles, doubts, dreams, and feels deeply. In her acceptance, he feels anchored. It's not excitement that binds him, it's peace. It's the quiet knowing that he can be himself and still be wanted. And in that silence between them, in that invisible exchange of trust and care, he feels something that goes beyond attraction. He feels home. When connection becomes real, it changes the way a man experiences everything. What once felt like a pursuit of pleasure turns into a moment of profound awareness, a merging of body, mind, and emotion that defies logic. For him, it's no longer about the thrill of conquest or the rush of attraction. It's about the synchronization that happens when two people meet, not just in proximity, but in presence. When he feels truly seen, truly wanted, and emotionally connected, every touch, every glance, every silence begins to carry meaning. It's as if time slows down and the noise of the world fades away. In that space, he's not trying to perform or impress. He's simply being. And that state of being, shared with someone who meets him with the same openness, becomes the most powerful form of connection he's ever known. What touches him most deeply in that experience is not what happens externally, but what awakens internally. He feels a sense of safety that allows him to drop his guard completely, to let himself feel without hesitation. There's a sacredness to that kind of connection, one that makes him realize how intimacy is less about physical closeness and more about emotional attunement. When she looks at him and he sees recognition in her eyes, not admiration, but understanding, it hits something raw and ancient within him. It's a reminder that what he's always been searching for isn't excitement, but resonance. The feeling that someone else moves with the same rhythm, breathes in the same emotional tempo, and sees beyond his layers. That kind of intimacy makes him present in a way that nothing else does. It's also where he begins to redefine what pleasure means. Because real pleasure isn't intensity, it's connection. It's not how strong the desire is, but how safe he feels in it. The real pleasure comes from the freedom to let go, to not have to think, to not have to protect or prove. It's when he realizes that he can give and receive at the same time, that in being vulnerable, he doesn't lose power but gains depth. The joy in that moment is not the fleeting rush of passion. It's the stillness that comes when he feels emotionally seen. It's when he knows that he's not being used or needed, but chosen not for what he can do, but for who he is when he's stripped of all pretense. In that kind of connection, he becomes softer without losing strength, quieter without losing presence. There's a balance that emerges, a wordless communication that feels like truth. He feels her energy responding to his, and in that mutual awareness, something sacred forms between them. It's the space where ego disappears, where giving becomes effortless, and where being together feels like both a homecoming and a discovery. That's what connection does to him. It redefines what fulfillment means, turning what once was physical into something deeply spiritual. After the moment has passed and the quiet settles in, what lingers inside a man is not the intensity of what just happened, but the memory of how he felt when his defenses were gone, when everything external fades, the words, the touch, the adrenaline. He's left alone with the echo of something much deeper, the feeling of being accepted. It's not about the act itself, but about what it represented. That for a brief, unguarded moment, he was allowed to exist without roles, without expectations, without the need to prove or perform. That memory stays with him long after, like a scent that can't be forgotten because it reached a part of him that is rarely touched. He may not be able to describe it, but he knows it's different. It's the kind of feeling that doesn't just pass through him, it anchors itself quietly in the corners of his mind. In the stillness that follows, he replays moments, the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the way her energy felt steady, accepting, calm. These small details are what he holds on to. They remind him of what it felt like to be safe in someone's presence, to be seen and not judged. For a man, that feeling is not ordinary. It's something he remembers instinctively, returning to it when the world demands that he be hard again. When he's back to navigating responsibility, pressure, and control, that memory serves as a private refuge. A reminder that there is a place, or at least a person, where he doesn't have to pretend. That's what truly stays with him, the emotional imprint of being enough, even for a moment. The aftermath of connection reveals what kind of man he really is. If he felt genuinely accepted, he will carry a sense of calm, a kind of gratitude that doesn't need to be spoken. He becomes more reflective, more gentle with himself, but if he felt unseen or misunderstood, the emptiness will amplify and he'll retreat further into himself, confusing vulnerability with weakness once again. That's why the emotional tone that lingers after intimacy often shapes how he relates moving forward. It's not the event that matters, it's the emotional residue, the energy that stays between two people after everything else fades. When he feels that the connection was honest and safe, it becomes a point of reference for what love can feel like. It teaches him that strength isn't in control, but in the ability to surrender and still feel respected afterward. He may go back into his world, his work, his responsibilities, but a part of him carries that softness quietly. It shows up in how he speaks, in how he listens, in how he approaches closeness again. What lingers isn't the rush of desire, but the memory of being met without judgment. It's what transforms intimacy into attachment, desire into devotion, and a fleeting encounter into something that lives long after the moment is gone.